I got a lot of thoughts on this. First, I want to hit this point. I think there are a lot of people, not just at Fox, but in the media in general, who really don't understand new media. And I use you for an example. I actually used you on my show. It was about 2 weeks ago or so. I did a whole segment on your show because I didn't want to make the story about me. And I said, it's bizarre. They're writing, nobody can survive outside of Fox. They said, look at Megyn Kelly, who hasn't done much since. And I shook my head. I'm like, what a bunch of morons. Do they not understand? So I understand the podcast space, and I watch our rankings because I'm super competitive about everything. I know the audience you have. I can reasonably guess it. It's enormous. Forget even social or anything like that. I'm just talking about strict downloads and watches, right? So I'm reading these articles about how Glenn Beck, oh man, it's over for Glenn. Bill O'Reilly finished. Megyn hasn't done anything. That Dan Bongino and Tucker, they're going to be finished. And I'm thinking, these people really don't get it. And I'm talking about media in general, but I'm not sure some people at Fox really understand that. They were good to me. I'm not going to knock them to me. The Tucker thing, I think, obviously was an enormous, catastrophic mistake. I have friends over there still. I enjoyed my time. I love them to death. And I'm not telling you anything I haven't told them. I just don't think they understand that a lot of people in cable news, Megyn, are fighting yesterday's war. They beat CNN and it's over. That fight has been number one for 20 years. They're not the problem now. You're the problem. Podcasts, Rumble, YouTube, Twitter with Elon. That's the problem. The space has been totally disaggregated right now. People can go put Megyn Kelly in a search engine and watch your show 1,000 different ways. They can watch clips on Twitter. People spread it around. And I did this whole thing on my show, and I did a simple internet search of Megyn Kelly. I'm like, wow, totally irrelevant. They only wrote about her 10 times today. I'm like, what kind of idiot thinks? Right? And again, you're in my time slot. So I didn't care. I really love the whole parallel media system. And I don't give a damn. I want to see you succeed and everyone else. But I just think, number one, it was a huge mistake because they may say to themselves, with Tucker at least, getting back to that specific thing, no sweat, don't worry about it. Where's he going to go? Well, the answer is it doesn't matter. Wherever he goes, people are just going to go find him like they find you on Sirius, the internet, Rumble. It doesn't matter. The whole system's been broken apart. And I really think, just to wrap this up, for Fox's sake, because again, I have friends over there, and Megyn, for as many issues as you and I may have, we need Fox. We need a healthy, conservative alternative. And Newsmax is doing great, not knocking them. Their audience is exploding. But it's still, even with people leaving Fox, isn't Fox's audience, we need them healthy. What are we going to do? Watch MSNBC or CNN? They need to explain what happened with Tucker. You can't leave this out there in the ether because people are filling in the blanks and saying, because of ABCD, XYZ, and filling in their own reasons. They got to explain this, or I think that the problems are going to continue.
Well, Fox is in no danger of going out of business, but they're being taught a lesson right now by a very angry audience. And I support the lesson. They've gotten too big for their own britches. They think they're the Fox News of 10 years ago, and they're not. They're on the way down. They're not on the way up anymore in terms of audience share and popularity, and they no longer have a monopoly for all the reasons you just stated. So some humility would serve them well right now in understanding their audience is their business. That is their entire business. You thumb the middle finger at those people, your business is over. They're your bosses. And to not even show them the courtesy of an explanation on their favorite host is absolutely disrespectful. And the audience is punishing them. It's punishing the whole primetime right now. And I think they're going to continue punishing the 8. They're now reportedly moving Hannity to 8, and they're going to put Jesse at 9, and they're going to put Gutfeld at 10. Laura moves to 7, according to the Drudge Report. I don't think that's smart right now because the audience likes Sean. He's been there for years. I know he's a good friend of yours. And I like Sean too. But they're punishing Fox. So don't take one of your biggest stars and line him up for punches in the face because he's going to get it too. He is going to get it next. And it's just not setting anybody up for success.
No, you're right. I mean, like Will Cain, for instance, was on this week. Everybody loves. Who doesn't like Will Cain? I mean, he's a good Will's guy. An impossible guy to not like. But the ratings are still not great. So your assertion there is absolutely correct. They're clearly not targeting them specifically because some shows have done okay. Like people in the 5 seems to be holding up reasonably well. But they really do need to provide some kind of an explanation. It's not going to work to keep it out there like that this didn't happen, because I think a lot of people think this may be some kind of anti-Trump thing. I got to say, that wasn't my case. My deal with Fox, I haven't told this story anywhere else. You get the first kind of crack at this outside of what I said on my podcast, but I was not targeted. My show, they were dying to re-up we negotiated for an entire year. So that I can't tell you like, oh, Fox got rid of me, because they didn't. That's all. The liberal, jerkwads are going to, Dan Bongino was fired. I just give them the middle finger. It's just stupid. They're just making it up. I was there. I negotiate my own deals. I don't have an agent. I do my own business deals. I don't need an agent. I do my own business, right? They wanted the show. I just had a different vision for my role at the network. And that's okay. I'm not the Saturday guy, Megan. I'm sorry. I can't work 6 days a week. I've got young kids. And I'm not working 6 days a week. And even though we recorded the show on Friday, the inside baseball of Fox. What happens when there's breaking news? Which with Trump out there is all the time. You got to be on. So I'm on a boat with my friend. I'm having a few adult sodas, maybe one too many adult sodas, not driving the boat. Don't worry about it. And all of a sudden you get a call. Hey, there's a balloon from China. We got to go live. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I'm in any condition to go live, but I'll give it a shot. And, not that I ever went on the air, but listen, it's hard. So I couldn't do it. And I said, I'm sorry, that's not going to work out. So I definitely was not fired. Liberals are just making that up. But with the Tucker thing happening, a couple of people, people call you and stuff. And I was definitely, I'm not trying to, I don't want to put lipstick on this thing, but I'm not the easiest guy to deal with, Megan. I'm like a major PETA, pain in the, you can figure out. I just am. Because I've got my own stuff. I've got my own investments. I've got Rumble. I've got my podcast, my radio show. And the thing I think your success out there on your own has bought you is freedom. Money buys freedom. Yeah. I hate to say it, but it's true. I know you're not in this strictly for the cheese, but let's be honest. It buys you freedom. And I was in a position with them where I could walk away from a show on Fox and say, I'm sorry, that's not my vision. And it's different. But someone told me later that, in the end, they weren't that eager the last few weeks to make this thing work because, you could be a little aggravating to work with. And that they're not wrong, and that's okay. Maybe I'm not a company guy in that respect.
I'm sure they're regretting it now.
I'm just not.
I mean, it's like,
I've got to, yeah.
You're one of the people they could have slid into that 8 o'clock time slot and won back over those angry viewers. So, I mean, talk about not planning out into the future when you make your employment decisions. But you and I both know, Dan, the truth is 95% of the people who are on those cable news lineups right now would do anything to be in your slot or my slot right now. That they want what we have. They want to get out of the thumb, from underneath the thumb of these big corporate cable giants who dictate what they can say, most of them know, the vast majority are platform players. They don't think that they could make it out here without the support of the Fox News digital platform and the cable channel and so on. So it's not available to everybody. But even many of the stars over there will text me and say, like, I'm so envious because you can do it on your own terms. And people you say that we're on the same time, nobody even knows that. They just download the Dan Bongino show. That's what I do.
Right.
And they can listen to you. They can listen to me. You can listen to it on 2-point speed. So you can get it fast, way more information than you would get if you were just sitting there watching freaking cable all day.
Yeah. You are so spot on. To your audience, Megan's not lying. I get these texts and phone calls all the time from people from other networks too. And they say the exact same thing. How do I do that? Do what? Get out on your own, establish a Rumble, a YouTube, whatever you want to do. Go out there and do your own show that you run, that you sell, that you have maybe a sales agent with at best, but you are the editor-in-chief of your own show. You run your own business. And very few people would trade the other way. Now, having a show on Fox or Newsmax is still nice. There are still people who are not that tech savvy. I mean, my dad, he admitted himself, I had to coach him through Rumble. It's not complicated, but he's used to turning on what I call, Megan, the one button problem. The advantage Newsmax and Fox still have over us is there's a generation of 40 plus, me included, who some of us are not that tech savvy. They are used to one button. They keep Fox or Newsmax on all day and they hit power. I call it the one button problem. The problem with Roku and other things.
Hey, everybody, I'm Megan Kelly. Welcome to the Megan Kelly
exactly
Show.
What to do. Bang, bang, bang. They're done. Easy. A lot of folks our age, they're not used to that. Oh, what do you mean? I got to go to an app? Where do I find that? And they give up. That's going away. In 10 years, that'll be a non-issue with smart TVs. The grandkids come over and show them one time and they're good. So that's where people like you and I on our own, and you got the people at the Daily Wire who are doing their own thing. That's when I think the cord cutting is going to be apocalyptic.
I know many of you make money freelancing or running a solo small business. You probably love the flexibility and control, but hate the crushing busy work. You could hire a bunch of different people, like a CPA, a bookkeeper, even an attorney, and end up paying thousands of dollars a month. Or you could use Collective. Collective is an all-in-one. We wound up on November. All right, I got to find something else to do. But the same thing I think that made Trump deny that he could have possibly lost an election is the thing that made him say, of course I will be the nominee the next time if I choose to run. And then in a way, he manifested it. In a way, the power of positive thinking, which by the way is a hugely influential book in Trump's life and his history, actually works for the guy. And before you knew it, we wound up on November 5th, 2024, with Donald Trump winning the presidency again.
You mentioned the power of positive thinking. The other thing when we do his biography that people talk about is his dad and this idea of winners and losers, which is something he talks about being a winner. I mean, how important do you think that moment, what is it like for Donald Trump at that moment when he realizes he's won, he's made this comeback, and he's headed back to the presidency?
I think those are real moments of joy for Donald Trump. You know, I wouldn't describe Trump, I think he's a happy warrior, and I think he's entertained by a lot of things. I'm not sure I'd call him truly like a joyful guy. He's a serious guy. You know, he's not silly. But I think when you see him accomplish something big, like whether it's in business or marrying somebody as extraordinary as Melania, or doing something as incredible as winning the presidency, you can see that look on his face that is a little calmer, is a little bit more serene. There's a greater maturity to the look, where I think it is true joy and appreciation for what this crazy life has brought to him, what he's made it bring to him.
Let's go back to when you first come across, when a lot of us first come across him as a politician in 2015 and 2016. There's a lot of moments along the way where it seems like he would be out, starting with, comments about John McCain, his interaction with you. There's a lot of places where it seems like he would be done. What is it when you look back at him as a politician in those years? Was it that allowed him to overcome everybody saying there's no way, laughing at him, that he's going to get this nomination or win?
Well, I think many of us looked at his comments as controversial or unacceptable or offensive. And there was a certain population in the country that saw one thing: wrecking ball, middle finger, burn it down. He doesn't care who he's offending. He doesn't care if it's John McCain, someone as beloved as John McCain, a war hero, which Trump took issue with. He doesn't care if it's this, well-known personality on Fox News primetime, a woman no less. That can be quicksand for a powerful man, no problem. He doesn't care if it's a Gold Star family, which any politician would say, for the love of God, don't attack them. Didn't care. Federal judge, nope, no problem. And Hillary Clinton on the debate stage, openly saying they're corrupt, I'd put her in jail, all that. And while a lot of these so-called, establishment types recoiled in horror, this other segment of the population, which had been ignored for so long, saw, that's our fighter. That's our guy. He's not with them. He doesn't want to be part of their club. Finally, someone who doesn't care if he's part of their club or not, which makes him part of our club. We've never had somebody who's part of our club who wants this job. And that is what I believe made those people get up off the couch for the first time ever and pull the lever for him.
Do do you know why he doesn't care? I mean, because he cares about winning, and he's being told the things he's doing are making him lose.
Well, I'm going to blow your mind with the answer. I think Trump is honest. I mean, he lies like all politicians lie. But there is a strain in Trump that's extremely honest. He's on sort of the radical honesty program when it comes to some things. And the way the system works, the way it's set up, is one of them. And that was a really important thing to have right. Both times he won. Because he was able to stand up there and say, yeah, that's right, I don't pay taxes, it makes me smart. Or, yeah, you've all been in my office on the bended knee asking me for money, and I paid you both just so I could own you. You know, if people had never heard anybody talk like that before, and it was true, you knew it was true. You can tell when someone's saying something that is really true and radical and controversial. It has an air to it that resonates, and Trump is very adept at that, very. So it worked. It worked for, the regular man. It worked for the more sophisticated man who felt maybe a little threatened by it, but also intrigued by it. And I think, with now almost 10 years of Trump in the public sphere, we can all see it so much more clearly, right? Like what he was doing and how it wasn't an act and it wasn't a tactic. It's who he is. It's the guy right now who tried to put Matt Gaetz in charge of the DOJ. It's the guy who tried to put Pete Hegseth in charge of DOD. The guy who's putting Tulsi as a DNI. The guy who's putting RFKJ as head of HHS. Wrecking ball, middle finger, burn it down. I'm anti your fancy elite establishment circles.
I mean, and the biggest comeback that seemed like he was gone was the Access Hollywood moment. Did you think he was down in that moment? And what do you ascribe to his comeback from that?
100%. I thought it was over for Trump. I didn't think he was going to withdraw after Access Hollywood, but I certainly thought he had no chance of winning. And that was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. That sort of a tape with that kind of language. And it was the only time Trump apologized. He did that sort of self-flagellation tape where he called it locker room talk, but it was an extraordinary moment. And I remember Bill Bennett, former education secretary under Reagan and a Fox News contributor, came on my show that night. And he'd been a big Trump defender. And he was so forlorn, saying, it's just such a shame. What a shame. It was like looking so good for him. And I trusted Bill, and I thought, yeah, he's right. He's calling it. He's got years of experience. And then Trump the fighter. That's really, if you're going to make a movie about Donald Trump, it should be called The Fighter. Trump the fighter got back up and said, no, I will not let you keep me down here. And showed up at that debate that followed with Juanita Broderick and Kathleen Willey. It was like, and we all, again, like the buttoned up establishment types were like, the impropriety. Oh my goodness, we've never seen such a, what is he doing? Oh my God, it's working. He totally neutralized the growing narrative about him and women and made the choices look a lot less clear than they had prior to him reminding us what the husband of his opponent had done for years to women. Very effective technique and part of Trump's just unwillingness to stay down.
That's interesting because you've added to it now the power pause thing, but also the fighter is part of how he does the comeback, and I guess that's something you can see throughout his life.
Well, there's no better example than what happened in July of 2024, right? The first assassination attempt. What did he say? What did he say with the fist up? It's no accident, if you've been watching Trump, that the first thing that came to mind was him telling his supporters to fight. That wasn't an act. It wasn't an affectation. That is who he is in his core. And Trump looked angry in that moment. And sometimes when you're angry, your truest feeling will come out. Sometimes a false feeling will come, but sometimes it's your truest and deepest feeling. And you will say the thing you mean above all other things. And I do believe that message was sincere. And it was a rallying cry, for his supporters and fans and others beyond. We saw people like Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying, what a badass moment. We saw Democrats like Nate Silver, others praising this moment that you wouldn't expect your average Democrat to relate to, but it was a universal message, and it was totally authentic for him.
We've talked to you before about the debate moment, but I'm curious about now, looking back on it from where you are now with the perspective of 2024. Do you look back on it differently, the interaction with him, what happened to you afterwards?
Well, I think I have a better perspective on it now. I'm able to put it in the proper file now. I think it was, Trump's response to me that night and thereafter was part of his fighter nature and was also part of his messaging to the populace that there were no sacred cows for Trump, including a Fox News anchor. He didn't care about bending the knee, not to me, but to Rupert Murdoch, who I think he viewed as a proxy. And I know Steve Bannon, I think to this day, thinks that Rupert Murdoch was behind my tough questions or Brett's or Chris's. It isn't true. I mean, I feel like people would believe me by this point. I would just be...
He will work alongside newly confirmed FBI Director Kash Patel. The deputy director position does not need Senate confirmation. Bongino is a former Secret Service agent. And Director Patel, an outspoken ally of President Trump, will possibly have some additional duties. He will also serve as acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. There is some speculation that President Trump plans to merge part of the ATF with the FBI. When Joe Biden was vice president, he proposed putting ATF under the FBI. Talk show host Dan Bongino as deputy director of the FBI. He will work alongside newly confirmed FBI Director Kash Patel. The deputy director position does not need Senate confirmation. Bongino is a former Secret Service agent. And Director Patel, an outspoken ally of President Trump, will possibly have some additional duties. He will also serve as acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. There is some speculation that President Trump plans to merge part of the ATF with the FBI. When Joe Biden was vice president, he proposed putting ATF under the FBI to deal with mass shootings.
How do you make an Airbnb a Verbo?
The really entertaining thing about Donald Trump is there's no censor. He just boom, right out there. And I'm kind of the same way.
You don't say.
Tonight,
It's Trump. Everything he does seems to turn into gold.
A personal portrait of the world's most public person.
Does everybody have it? What we have to show is going to be totally magnificent. If you haven't seen it,
He's much more relaxed when the cameras are off. Trump feels that he has to entertain his audience as well as put forth his point of view on various issues.
Bill O'Reilly has known Donald Trump for 35 years, and he's seen every side of the man who's defined an era.
We love Trump! We love Trump! Trump gets up there, puts on a show.
The showman, the competitor, the survivor, and the family man.
He's a man who lives to win.
There may be nobody who's known the Donald longer and better, willing to reveal this much.
I don't want to be, this is private stuff.
It's just you and I, Bill. Come on. Forget what you think you know.
Most American press, they don't care to understand Donald Trump. They just want to put forth a caricature.
And join us for a guided tour of the United States of Trump. Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. Bill O'Reilly, journalist, presidential historian, and outspoken political observer, has known Donald Trump since the early 90s. He's interviewed Trump dozens of times, often combatively. And beyond that, they've chatted privately, gone to ball games. They even went on a memorable double date. More about that later. Back in 2019, Bill wrote a book about the then president's view of the country, the United States of Trump. He did not hold back. But a lot's happened since then, and there's a lot more Trump to come. So tonight we delve into this unique relationship, the many sides of Trump that Bill has seen up close and personal, and how they all come back to one thing: winning. You were with Trump at Mar-a-Lago as he prepared to take office for the second time. How was that different than the Donald Trump you saw before he was prepared to take office the first time?
As Trump would say, huge. Okay, so when he was elected in 16 and took over in 17, he didn't know what he was doing. And he'll tell you that. He comes out of New York City real estate world where he knows everybody and he gets what he wants, into Washington, D.C., where everybody hates him, and he's not getting what he wants, even from his own team. And he's not quite sure about who's good and who's bad. So the first year was chaos.
Do you believe that?
Now, 8 years later, he knows. And when I was in the meeting with him in early January, it was an unbelievable window. Donald Trump was as clear and as authoritative as I have ever seen him in 35 years of knowing the man.
Okay, but the two of you guys, you grew up sort of around the same time, and you both have gone through, personally and professionally, some tough times.
Sure, everybody does.
But there's something about you and Trump that you understand each other.
We're both flamboyant, boisterous at times.
Confident.
You are a rude, terrible person.
Well, who's getting hosed? Overconfident? Overconfident?
Your words, not mine.
So we do have personality traits, but we certainly come at life in a way different way. What we do have in common is I'm not going to let the bastards get me down. I'm not going to let them win. That's what O'Reilly and Trump have in common.
All right, Bill. Describe Donald Trump for me.
Well, Donald Trump is a unique individual for a lot of reasons. Primarily, he's a man who lives to win. He is the most competitive person I have ever encountered.
In his mind, the worst thing you can be is a loser.
Well, I wouldn't say that. But he separates winners from losers, and he wants to associate with winners.
And he wants to be a winner.
He is a winner.
Help me understand where this guy goes from going to school, and nobody really remembered him. He wasn't a big man on campus. Where did the switch flip?
Well, he goes to Fordham. And this is, Vietnam time, turbulence time, and everybody's, dressed like Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison, and Trump's wearing a jacket and tie walking around because his sole focus, even when he was in college, was on real estate.
You go back in the book to two people emerging in New York at the same time, Joe Namath, the quarterback, and Donald Trump. How does Trump pick Joe Namath?
He went out and wiped out Baltimore the next day. It was one of the big upsets of all time.
Well, that was a cinch. I took the Baltimore Colts out that night before.
He admires people who are daring. Daring is the word. And Trump's a big sports guy. Joe Willie wins the Super Bowl, predicts he's going to win it. As far as celebrity is concerned, Joe Willie goes anywhere in New York City, every door opens, every woman stares. He's by far the biggest star in this town.
So Trump sees that and wants to be that.
He wants to be that. Okay. But he can't be that as an athlete, but he can be that in business. So here's a guy who comes out of a wealthy family in Queens, and his father is successful, but his father doesn't want to be mega successful. And his son, Donald, does. And that clashes because he keeps pushing his father. We need more, more, more. And his father goes, no, we have enough. We dominate Queens and Brooklyn in real estate. We don't have to go into Manhattan. But Donald Trump, from a very early age, wanted to be a mega success. So he drags his father and says, look, you see this hotel, the Commodore Hotel? We're going to buy this. Father goes, I don't want to buy this. This is a dump. Okay, Trump goes, no, I'm going to get it. That starts it. Buys it, turns it into a big success as a Hyatt, okay? And then, boom. Donald Trump, he wanted to go big time. He was driven to do that. And once you understand that his whole life is about accomplishment. He doesn't have any hobbies, doesn't scuba dive.
Golfs.
He does golf, but that's not a hobby. Golf is a passion for him.
Competition, he can win.
He's got to be, if he has a bad round, you don't want to be around, okay?
I know the feeling.
He's up there. So life is a competition. When I used to go to the games with him, the Yankee and Knick games and things like that, Mets, he was good for 6 innings at the game. And then he's gone. That was all he could give you because he has stuff to do. And he doesn't sleep. He doesn't sleep because he has stuff to do. Donald Trump gets bored easily, okay? He wants action. And so when he's bored, watch out.
Is that where the mean tweets come from?
That's where everything comes from.
So Donald Trump bored on a Saturday afternoon.
No good.
It's winter.
No
he can't
good.
play golf.
Right.
He's at the White House.
Right. I told him he should hire Taylor Swift to just follow him around. And when he gets bored, Taylor would sing or do a dance or something, anything to divert him from being bored.
You said this. One thing has been a constant in Donald Trump's world. He never admits he's wrong, and he never says, I'm sorry.
Don Jr., his son, very loyal to him, said, I have never in my entire life heard my father admit to a mistake, unquote. So Don Jr. said he sees it as a weakness.
Is that dangerous, though, for a guy who has the nuclear codes?
No.
Always escalate to de-escalate?
That's just ridiculous. If you look at Trump's first term, he was adverse to aggressive military action across the board. Yes, he destroyed ISIS, and he had to, and he wanted to. He got Soleimani, and he had to, and he wanted to. But committing American forces and all that, Trump is smart enough to know that is never going to work again in this world. It's way too dangerous. He'll escalate the rhetoric.
Trump will always escalate the rhetoric, but not the action.
Senator Marco Rubio, thank you very much, Mr. Senator.
But there's this romance of reconciliation with Donald Trump, right? Is that he can insult people, and then when they're willing to come back into the fold and compliment him, he loves having you. Little Marco is now Secretary of State.
Big Marco. Little Marco went to Big Marco. And look, he's a very smart guy. And what he did was what Cruz did and what a whole bunch of other Republicans did. They surrendered.
You think about the moment of Donald Trump seething as Obama roasts him and humiliates him on national television.
I invited Trump to the Washington Correspondents' Dinner.
Oh boy.
He and I sat there. President Obama ripped Trump up like it was unbelievable.
And then you see the moment at Jimmy Carter's funeral where Donald Trump is laughing and having a great time and yucking it up with Obama. It looks like they're old buddies there saying goodbye to an old friend. Can Trump do that because he's won now? It's more important to win than it is to win on the grudge.
Absolutely right. He's not malevolent. You know, this is if you listen to the NBCs of the world, CNNs of the world, New York Times of the world, this is the devil. He's the devil. He's cruel, he's mean. That's not true. He's transactional, and he wants to win every transaction. And when he feels that he's won, it's over.
And he's the most gracious guy in the world.
I wouldn't say that. Let's frame it this way. He can be gracious.
Coming up, he's not just a successful businessman and a politician.
So help me God.
Donald Trump is a consummate performer.
And he points. You ever notice? And it's always he ends up going in the opposite direction ultimately.
Trump, the showman.
I'm going to get you some French lessons. Somebody come up here and say.
When we come back. Is Donald Trump the ultimate showman?
I wouldn't say he's the ultimate showman. Elvis was the ultimate showman. But he likes Elvis.
And he would love that comparison.
And he liked Michael Jackson. And he liked Joe Namath. And he likes these larger-than-life guys because he admires the fact that they have the skill set and the cojones to go out and present themselves that way, and then they get this enormous positive feedback. That's him.
I want to take you back to knowing Donald Trump socially, right? You're a reporter and you start to get to know Donald Trump. You go on a double date with him to go see a Paula Abdul show.
He asked me to do him a favor. He said, hey, my current relationship, Marla Maples, has a college roommate in town. Would you accompany her to a concert with us? So I said, okay. It's hysterical. We take an elevator up to the suite, and I go, oh, this is all right. I'm in the suite, free food, decent view of the stage, and this will be okay. This is what I'm saying to myself. No. Trump wants to walk around the arena. So he goes out into the concourse, and it's bedlam, screaming and yelling and like all of this. He loves it. And that's when the light went off for me and go, this guy wants to be a star.
He loves
it. He loves it. And
does he need it?
I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. But most performers, politicians, athletes, whatever, they love the adulation. That's why they're in it.
You said Elvis. A number of these people, Michael Jackson, have all been overtaken, shall we say, by some of their worst proclivities or their worst parts of their psyche. Somehow Donald Trump has not been so far. How do we explain that?
He's a smart guy in a sense that he's not self-destructive, and that's what usually does the superstars in.
This week,
he's also, his
I will
brother
also
was an
end.
alcoholic, and he loved his brother. His brother died in his 40s from booze, and he swore he would never get involved, and he hasn't. All right, doesn't drink, doesn't take drugs, doesn't do anything.
Diet Cokes and milkshakes.
But he's not going to do anything on a consistent basis to destroy himself, because that's not winning.
What do you take?
This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
2 weeks ago, I signed an executive order banning men from playing in women's sports. Many Democrats are fighting me on that. I hope you continue, because you'll never win another race. And it's just crazy. If you look at what happened with the boxing, if you look at what happened with the weightlifting numbers, where a record that hadn't been broken for 19 years got shattered. But, they put up an eighth of an ounce here, an eighth of an ounce there, and it's 218 pounds or whatever was that. And hadn't been broken in 19 years. And then guy walks up who transitioned. He transitioned, and he knocked out that record by about 100 pounds. That would be a record not going to be broken again in a long. So we put a ban on it, and to protect women. I mean, the women, if you watch the Olympics, you had two transitioned people that were fighting in the women's boxing. They have women's boxing category, and if you saw that, it was brutal. What happened to the Italian woman was a really good boxer. After one punch, she said, no more. I've never been hit. It was a left. It was not even it was just a left jab. She got hit so hard, she said, I can't do it. They forced her to go out. No, go out again. You'll do it. Goes out again, gets hit again. No, that's it. She didn't want to die, and it's crazy, but the NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is the Maine here, the governor of Maine?
I'm here.
Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one.
These kids are going to be deprived of community, friendship, and learning opportunities out of cruelty.
It absolutely is a win.
It's the latest development in a heated national debate around transgender athletes in women's sports.
And we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
President Donald Trump following through on a campaign promise, signing an executive order titled Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports, which he says will be enforced immediately. Joining the president, women and girls of all ages, like 12-time All-American pro swimmer Riley Gaines, who's been waiting for this day for years, speaking to Nightline in 2022.
Not only were women kind of put in this position where we have biological males competing against us, we were put on the back burner for biological males.
If one girl is knocked off of a team because a male competed on that team, one girl is knocked off of a podium, that is one too many.
This is a huge development. It's a big cultural issue. It's divided the country.
Under the new order, schools that don't comply risk having their funding cut.
It's also a maximum use of federal power, using the power of the purse to tell them how they should run their sports.
Advocates celebrating the move, arguing that allowing trans athletes to compete could give an unfair advantage.
In many ways, it's President Trump finishing what he started in his first term to again ensure fairness, safety, and privacy for women and girls.
But trans advocates say it's discrimination and a violation of human rights. We first sat down with Leah Thomas in 2022 when she came out as trans as a UPenn swimmer and found herself at the center of this fiery debate.
What has the reaction been in the trans community? Explain that a bit.
This executive order is among other executive orders and other legislative moves to further police bodies and police who is woman enough to fit into that category and be allowed to compete.
Thomas won an NCAA title that year in the 500-yard freestyle. Her success is quite rare. According to the NCAA president, out of 510,000 NCAA athletes, fewer than 10 are known to be trans. And yet her victory ignited a heated debate in women's sports.
You set the record. In many ways, do you fear that your success in some part triggered some of this backlash that we're seeing now?
It was hard not to sort of place a little bit of blame on myself that it's not because of me, it's because Republicans in positions of power are trying to control and limit our autonomy and how we can live our lives. And if it wasn't me, it would have been the next trans woman.
On the one hand, trans athletes and the people who support them say, look, this is who they are. And they would like to compete in the athletics that they love. On the other side of people are saying it's just unfair. Even some people who support equality and equal opportunity and a flourishing life in our society for trans people feel this is a step too far.
According to a 2023 Gallup poll, 69% of Americans believe transgender athletes should only be allowed to compete on teams that conform with their gender assigned at birth.
We're talking about 12-year-olds who have lived their whole lives as who they are and are being asked to then play on a different gendered team.
Skylar Baylor made history as the first openly trans male athlete to compete in NCAA Division I sports, swimming for Harvard in 2015.
Skylar, what comfort do you give to those who are feeling like this is a real turnaround, a setback for trans rights and the trans community?
I think this is something that's critical, and to validate those emotions while also reminding that we are absolutely capable of moving through this.
Bodies come in all shapes and sizes. There's no one single determinative factor in athletic performance. It's just too complicated to narrow down to one thing.
So what Trump is doing typically is sort of seizing the hottest issue and going at it with maximal force.
It's the latest move following a flurry of anti-trans executive orders.
We've gotten the woke lunacy out of our military. And now we're very importantly getting it out of women's sports. That's taking place very strongly.
He signed an executive order saying that the United States government only recognizes two sexes, male and female, for all purposes. He also banned gender-affirming care for people under the age of 19. And now the ban on transgender athletes in school sports across the country.
Well, joining me now is the author and commentator which seems to stump many other leaders. Here's the clip. What is a woman? We know that Nicola Sturgeon can't answer that. We know Keir Starmer can't answer that. You're the British Prime Minister. What is a woman?
Yeah, of course I know a woman, an adult human female.
It's not difficult, is it, Angelica? I mean, that is what a woman is.
I mean, I don't know why you're obsessed with defining it. Like, what is a man? Like, why do we need these arbitrary...
A man is a male adult human. I mean, that's it.
Right, okay, I don't know that we need
these are just biological facts, but they're just facts. They're not arguable points, are they?
Well, but I think we have a right to self-identify, and you said
as
you
what?
want to...
As what?
If you would like to be a woman, you can identify as a woman. I don't know why there is such an issue around...
We've literally just seen a male rapist use that scam to get himself put into a female prison where he could attack vulnerable women inside a female prison, when even his ex-wife said it was all a scam.
Which is a terrible, very distressing, isolated incident, and I think it's easy to take that and say that means that no one can identify as a woman.
But
and
it's not an isolated incident, though.
But it's
42% of trans-identifying prisoners in prison are in there for sex crimes. There's actually an advantage, evidently, to identifying as a female, because they never identify as male, because somehow male prisons seem less appealing to them. It's really weird. Anyway, but
is it limitless, this self-identity?
It's not totally limitless.
What's the limit?
When you're talking about International Women's Day, I don't know why we take the conversation around International Women's Day and make it about this.
But if anyone,
there's so many benefits.
Right, but if anyone, according to you, can identify as a woman, anyone can, right?
I don't see a problem with.
Just literally put the hand up and say I'm a woman.
But it's not an easy thing to do, to go out into the world.
It's very easy.
Right. You might think it's easy to say, but to decide to do that, to say
what does doing it involve?
Whatever that person decides, but to go out into the world and say, I don't identify as perhaps the sex I was born as.
So why can't I identify... Okay, why can't I identify as a black lesbian?
Well, firstly, I mean, it was...
Well, I'm serious. If I can identify as anything without any need to prove I'm actually what that is, why can't I, on International Women's Day, say I'm Piers Morgan, I'm a black lesbian?
I think taking it to a kind of absurd status,
I think
we're
that's
talking about quite a
with
strong
respect, I think that
change.
you'd already opened the absurdity door by saying it is limitless. You can do what you like. Anyone can say, I'm a woman. So I simply ask you, why can't I?
I mean, this point kind of ridicules trans people to an extent.
Actually, I think what you said ridicules trans people, because actually people who go through the full process of transition, who actually go through what we used to call a sex change, which I don't think you can muck around with original biology, but those who actually go through surgical procedure over a number of years, I've got great respect for that very difficult journey they go on. I have zero respect for people who just wallop their hand up and go, suddenly, I'm a woman and I want all the rights that a woman has, and I want to compete, say, in sport. I'm a 6'4" athlete, sprinter, swimmer, whatever, who's competed very mediocrely in male sport. I now want to come in and crush women in swimming pools and in sprinting events and break all their records, perhaps irrevocably, just by saying, I'm a woman. I think that is the absurdity you were talking about. My response was to say, well, if it's limitless, why can't I then say whatever I want to say? And you say immediately, as I knew you would, well, that's ridiculous. But my point is, you were being ridiculous.
Well, that's your opinion. You can think I'm ridiculous, but I don't think you can say, well, it has to...
I don't know why I am, but you're not.
I don't think you have to say it's post-op is the only way that someone's allowed to identify as trans.
The original standard original standard for being transgender was being diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is a legitimate condition. And now it's being, however way you feel. So if you feel on Tuesday you're a woman and on Thursday you're a pizza, that's perfectly valid. But to you, that's ridiculous. And I want to know why that is ridiculous. We should be talking about actual women on International Women's Day. That's not crazy.
I mean, I agree. But your idea of an actual woman...
chromosomes.
It's an adult female. It's not difficult.
The chromosomes are a pretty good indication.
I don't think you have to be biologically female to identify.
Then you are wrong, because then I can identify as a fox.
Yeah.
But again, it's a kind of absurd point.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Angelica. How many genders are there?
2.
There are 2 genders.
Oh.
Wow. So you don't believe in transgenders at all?
Well, I think there are...
Well, hang on. Whoa. There are 2 genders?
Well, it's taught in...
Well, why do you say well? You've literally just launched this huge defence of transgenderism. Now you've eradicated it.
I think there's...
If there are 2 genders, you mean male and female, right?
There's gender fluidity. I will...
Fluid between what?
Between what?
between different identities, and we can choose different identities.
You see how difficult this is, though?
But it is difficult, but I think making...
But it's not difficult until you make it difficult. You see, the BBC has done teaching videos to 11 and 12-year-olds where they say there are 100 genders. One of them was astrogender, which is an affinity with the stars and the galaxy. My response to that on the last show I did was to say, well, in that case, I identify as a two-spirit penguin. I was then told I was being ridiculous, but I made the same point. The ridiculousness is the BBC teaching kids there are 100 genders. There aren't. It is absurd. Bring back Tommy Lehran, who I imagine is hyperventilating over there in America. Tommy, I mean, look, I don't see why, if it's limitless, I can't just say, I'm Piers Morgan, I'm a black lesbian. Because that is where limitless self-identity takes us. It means that male rapists can say they're women and get into female prisons. It means I can say I'm a two-spirit penguin or a black lesbian, and why can't I? Because that is where it takes you.
Well, it certainly does, and I think you just had the perfect argument there. It's impossible to define...
Lionel Messi puts his hand up and says, actually, I'm feeling like a woman today. Do you play him in the American women's national team, Francesca? Yes or no?
Yes, right now. Hell yeah, are you kidding me?
They are useful idiots like you that are validating ascientific nonsense. There's no such thing as gender identity.
Esther, you're the only thing making anyone angry or incensed right now, so you're causing me a mental health issues.
Your guests sit here and they cry boo-hoo tears about trans rights, but then they dismiss Caitlyn Jenner.
Girl, don't you have a Beyonce album to get pissed off about?
Teenage runner Aidan Gallagher became the Oregon Girls 200-meter state champion last week, posting one of the fastest times in the state's history with a remarkable display of power and stamina. But as Aidan crossed the finish line, something, well, pretty unusual happened. Instead of joyous cheering and adulation, many of the watching spectators loudly booed. Well, the same thing happened when Gallagher received a gold medal on the podium, but the runner-up was loudly cheered when she received her silver. And there's an explanation for all this. Gallagher is a transgender athlete who was born a biological male and therefore has a vastly superior physiology to show for it. And as viral video clips from the race show, Gallagher towered over many of the competing girls, displaying greater height, power and speed that frankly made a mockery of any pretense to fairness or equality. The reaction of the crowd is a small moment in the grand scheme of things, but it might prove to be extremely significant. A couple of years ago, it would have been very different. This would have been hailed as he led his progressive symbolic victory for inclusivity and tolerance. But now mainstream opinion is finally waking up to what is honestly insane. World Athletics has banned trans athletes who've been through male puberty from competing against women. But the state-level bureaucrats are miles behind. The Oregon authorities say they define a woman based on their consistently asserted gender identity. But honestly, that's just disingenuous bullshit. Yes, trans people deserve the same rights and respect as everybody else. They should have fairness and equality. They should have the same human rights as me. But you can't consistently assert the massive physical differences that come from being born male or female and compete in sport. Those rights cannot come at the expense of women's rights to fairness and equality in their own sport. Now, for years, anyone prepared to speak up about this, like me, was instantly shamed and vilified as a transphobe. But the reaction of the crowd in Oregon, which is actually skews more liberal than conservative, shows the silent majority might finally be fighting back and letting their feelings be heard loud and clear. Well, joining me to debate this and more, our comedian and podcaster James Barr, uncensored contributor Esther Kraken, Outkick host Tommy Lehran, and the host of the Bituation Room podcast, Francesca Fiorentini. So welcome to all of you. Tommy, let me start with you. I watched a video of this as a father of a 12-year-old girl who loves a bit of sport, and honestly, my heart just sank. But when I heard the booing, I was thrilled, not because the athlete was being booed. I felt awful for the trans athlete, but because I finally felt that the silent majority were finding their voice. What did you think?
Yeah, I also think that it's big that this happened in a place like Oregon. Oregon is not conservative, maybe certain parts, but certainly the majority of Oregon is certainly more on the left side. So I think the fact that the crowd is saying, hey, this is unacceptable, that's a big moment. But we just have to stop denying this, Piers. I mean, the silent majority, and I would agree that the majority, actually, the more vocal majority now, is saying that this is absolutely ludicrous. And listen, I think we need to stop talking about biological men competing against biological women in women's sports. This is a trans person, a trans woman competing against actual women. Stop dismissing women by calling us biological women. We are just women. So I want to put that out there first.
Yeah, I agree.
Why are we constantly, and when I say we, why is popular culture constantly asserting that trans people, their feelings, their emotions, their inclusion is more important than the majority of women who just want to have fairness, want to compete, want to have achievements, accomplishments, and opportunities? Why do their feelings matter more than the feelings of the women that they're competing against? It's ridiculous. We keep coddling and kowtowing to this madness. I hope we're seeing the end of it, and I think within the next couple of years we will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed that every woman, frankly, doesn't agree with you, because the unfairness and inequality is so obvious. But Francesca, I can see you actually going berserk here with indignation. So presumably you don't agree.
I mean, please don't speak for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, either of you, please don't speak for me. Please don't speak for all women. Just let's get that out of the way right now, because I do disagree. I think about, what if your 12-year-old kid was Aiden? Wouldn't that be incredible? Wouldn't you be proud of Aiden?
No.
And how much would it...
No, absolutely not. Unless that child had not even reached puberty, and in the case of my daughter, for example, and someone is trying to convince her that if you just put your hand up and say that you're a boy, you can suddenly compete against a different biological sex. I'd say it's all madness.
Piers, this is what's crazy about it. Do you think that that's what's driving trans women to compete as athletes, is that they're like, if I transition to become a woman, I can win a gold medal in a high school track and meet competition.
Hang on, Francesca. I don't care.
That is so absurd to me. It's the same thing. Hang on,
Francesca,
let me speak.
I don't care. The reality is they're doing it, right? And the point is that, to me, the answer is obvious.
They're not doing it to win a medal. They're doing it because that is their identity.
But they're winning medals at the expense of actual women who can't compete with them physically.
Okay.
It's why we separate the sexes.
You know what? Like, I actually Googled this.
Hang on. I'll come to you too.
I'm embarrassed to be a woman when I see women freaking out about trans women winning one out of so many competitions.
It's not just one.
Okay,
it's happening in swimming with Leah Thomas.
Hang on.
It's happening in all sorts of sports.
Yes, because it makes us look really pathetic, honestly. It makes us look like losers and whiners. And guess what? I'm not a loser or a whiner. You know what I actually want to talk about when it comes to women's sports? Why is Caitlin Clark being paid 80 times less than her counterpart entering the NBA?
Well, that's
because
quite
she's in the
straightforward too.
WNBA.
Because nobody watches
Women don't want to talk about that.
Hold on. Can I ask you a question?
Women don't want to ever talk about that.
Let me ask you a question. If I hit you over the head with a bat and I said the plan wasn't to kill you, it's because you had a fly in your head, would you still not go to the police for assault? Does my intention matter? Because that's exactly what you just said.
I'm just trying to Rube Goldberg.
That's exactly what you said. Just because trans people are not identifying as trans to basically erode women's sports, that makes it okay. That's exactly what they're doing. This is
you think that's what they're doing?
You
think trans people were put on Earth
Let me finish.
to
You know what the issue is.
Women's
You know
sports?
what the issue is. You know what the issue is.
Very funny to me.
You know what the issue is. They are useful idiots like you that are validating ascientific nonsense. There's no such thing as gender identity. Being trans-identifying is a mental illness, a reality that exists only in your head, should not be validated, and specifically not at the expense of people that are just going about their business trying to win sporting tournaments or trying to use
There's useful idiots like you that are leading to the death of trans people.
Because guaranteed,
then
you can basically go to an island where all women think like you, and you can compete with all the biological men you want, but do not impose your backward views on the rest of us and have the audacity to call us regressive.
Okay, Francesca, you respond. I'll come to James.
My response is this. Look, I care more about human life and people actually. I care about the right to privacy. I care about the people surviving and living in this world. Yes, I do.
You don't seem to care about the right to privacy of biological women not wanting to share their spaces with biological men. What about them?
What about the number of trans youth who commit suicide every single year?
What about biological women not wanting to share a bathroom with a biological man? Talk about that. Don't do what about, answer that question. What about them? Do they not matter?
Look, lady, you can go into every bathroom and pick a fight with every person who you think is in the wrong bathroom. That's your prerogative.
If a man goes into a bathroom with my daughter,
a teenager,
what should I do?
A teenager being booed. Guys, let's not bully, okay? I believe it was Melania Trump who said, "Be best," and we know what bullying leads to. Stephen Miller.
You know what
it is. Okay, but Francesca, I'm going to come to James, but because to me there's conflating two issues. You could absolutely support trans rights to fairness and equality, as I do and consistently have, but you can also see that there is obviously a massive problem now increasing now in women's sport. And there's a reason, and we've had this conversation, James, but you gave a preposterous answer last time. There's a reason we separate sexes in the Olympics, in the World Championships, because otherwise women would never win anything.
Look, I think...
So that's why we do it. It's not because women aren't great athletes.
Women would never win
They're great athletes when competing
What a quote
against people physically born
Listen,
like them.
I have so much to say. I want to explode. Firstly, Esther, you're the only thing making anyone angry or incensed right now. So you're causing me a mental health issue. So really, if there's a mental illness, it's actually you. I would like to take a pill to remove you from my life. Going back to the state here, like most of the female winners in this sport, they are hitting around 22 to 24 seconds, which is exactly what the gold medalist won here. And then also following up with what you said.
What's your point? What's your point?
My point is, this is normal for a woman.
No, you're missing
the normal speed for a woman in a race.
You're missing.
But let's get back to what you're saying. You're talking about women's safety in changing rooms. Let me finish, please.
On that
You're talking about women's safety in changing rooms. That's what Esther brought this conversation down to. But what I do know about is that 1 in 3 women in America are abused violently in their lifetime. And in every single day in America, 13,000 women are a victim. Why are we talking about one trans woman being in a changing room?
How dare you, a man, say anything about women feeling unsafe
I am allowed to talk about safety
with biological men? No, you can't, because you're not a woman. You have never had a period. You've never been a woman in a woman's toilet.
Esther, is
so
that
don't
you're
even mention
picking
that.
on one...
I'm not picking on that. I'm talking about the fact that women around the world are being affected because we are validating a scientific
But wait, you're shouting at biological men, your words. Why am I... And you're allowed to talk about biological men, so why am I not allowed to talk about women?
Hang on. We are conflating various issues here. So let's get back to the actual issue we want to debate, which is the issue of this young sophomore, Aidan Gallagher. I come back to Tommy here. You know, I know this debate always inspires everyone to get very angry, and there's lots of allegations of transphobia and so on. I really think they're missing the central point. There is a reason we separate sexes in sport. And the reason, like I said, when the Olympics are in Paris later this summer, if you allowed women and men to compete in a generalized way, then women would win almost no medals. Literally, other than 1 or 2 events, possibly equestrian, possibly archery, there are very few things which, anything that involves power or stamina or speed or snow.
Piers, can I ask you a question really quickly?
Yes.
Because have you ever undergone any kind of like hormone replacement therapy?
Oh, you mean chopped off his penis? Because
No,
that's
I haven't.
Hang on. I'm not talking to you, Esther.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Okay.
I'm talking to Piers.
Yeah.
Because actually, the body does undergo an incredible amount of toil.
What it doesn't do, Francesca, I've heard this argument.
Hang on.
It doesn't change your body mass.
No,
it doesn't.
It does.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely can change your body mass.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely. The amount of hormones
You remain as muscular.
that
You know, I know this. Talk to someone like Caitlyn Jenner, who was, as a man, was the decathlon gold medal winner for the United States of America, and was then, when she took up golf, having transitioned, was told she could tee off from the women's tees, right? The women's tees are 50 yards further ahead than the men's, and she said she was winning every tournament.
Asking Caitlyn Jenner for any advice or practical information is like asking you, Piers, for how to get a six-pack. Like, what are we doing?
Actually, I've got quite an impressive growing six-pack, as my Instagram feed will tell you.
The point is that your body undergoes a lot of changes.
Let me come to
it's
Tommy.
actually incredibly difficult to compete.
I want to point this out.
Tommy.
Piers, I want to point this out because your guests here, I mean, talk about the snake eating its own tail. They're sitting there talking about trans rights and affirming transgender ideology, but then they're saying that Caitlyn Jenner, who is probably the most famous trans person, that doesn't count. Because Caitlyn Jenner is not only a Republican, but Caitlyn Jenner also calls out biological men competing in women's sports. So your guests sit here and they cry boo-hoo tears about trans rights, but then they dismiss Caitlyn Jenner. It's amazing. These are also the same people who claim to be feminists, but also don't care about actual women being robbed of opportunities. That's why liberalism is a disease, and you can just let these people talk and they argue with themselves, Piers.
The point is, if Aidan Gallagher competed according to their biological sex, they would not be succeeding. They wouldn't be winning state championships. They would actually not even be qualifying for the finals. That is the point everyone's missing. Is that actually...
Why do you care about
women's integrity, women's sport?
But you don't. Have you done a segment on Caitlin Clark and pay disparity? Have you done a where were you when the U.S. women's national team?
He doesn't need to. You have no idea. Well, hang on. Francesca, you have no idea, actually.
Shut up.
You have no idea what I've said about women's pay.
What about when the women's national team wins in the United States, right? They've won like 4 times at this point. And what happens? Oh, Megan Rapinoe, who is both a lesbian and also like one-time knelt during the national anthem. She's not a real patriot. They freak out. Donald Trump tweets about her.
No, you're missing Megan Rapinoe. Megan Rapinoe is a very, very good football player, but also incredibly irritating. And I noticed that when she retired, it was only then she said that she wanted trans women to be playing in the American women's national team. In other words, when it wasn't possible for that person to take her position. Because here's a scenario for you. Lionel Messi puts his hand up and says, actually, I'm feeling like a woman today. Do you play him in the American women's national team, Francesca? Yes or no?
Lionel Messi had to undergo an incredible...
Yes or no?
He had to undergo an incredible amount of treatment when he was young. He had a bunch of like.
Would you allow him to put his hand up, say he's a woman, and play in the American women's national team?
He had a growth spurt. I'm a big Messi fan, but let me just explain this.
Answer my question. Would you allow him, if he said, I'm a woman, to play in the American women's national team?
You're using the wrong pronoun
Yes, right now. Hell yeah, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Messi on the U.S. women's national team? Hell yeah.
Would you allow Usain Bolt to do that and be in the sprinting team?
Yes, because that would mean they're a trans woman. They identify as women.
I get it. So just to be clear, you would let Lionel Messi play in the women's national football team and destroy women's football forever. You'd let Usain Bolt...
it'd be very difficult to get a ticket, which would suck.
I want to do a little checklist here. You'd let Usain Bolt compete as a sprinter in the American women's Olympic team?
Yes.
Okay. You would let Floyd Mayweather compete as a boxer in the women's American boxing team?
Yeah,
you
of
are
course you have to be like the heavyweight.
Lunatic.
I completely agree with Francesca. And I go further,
They would have to transition.
You always say that you want to be a penguin. I would let you live at London Zoo in a cage like the rest of the penguins.
You know what? I'd be a very popular exhibit.
You would. And you'd be locked up.
Here's the problem. It is so delusional. The idea you would let Usain Bolt say, I'm a woman, and compete against women on a racetrack when no man can compete with him, right? It's utterly ridiculous.
Well, I'm just convinced that they don't actually believe this, but to the logical conclusion of their ludicrous arguments facilitates the need to actually say these things. Also, this is a testament to the poor quality of public education in both the US and the UK, that you both don't understand the basic economics of how sports entertainment works. If there are not enough bums on seats, you don't get paid enough. That's literally it. So sitting there outraged about the fact that some female players don't make as much as some male athletes, guess what? Go and buy the tickets to their games and start boosting up their viewing figures, and then maybe...
More views.
Look at the revenue for the Women's World Cup and compare it to the Men's World Cup. They are light years away.
Can I say one thing?
Caitlin Clark was the most watched women's college player ever. The ratings were through the roof. She's getting sponsorships.
Compare it to the average male college viewership.
Okay, we're going to move on.
She had more views than them.
We are moving on to a different issue. I want to talk about Harrison Butker first. Tommy, I want to come to you on this. Let's just play a clip. This is a guy who's a Kansas City Chiefs star. He made a commencement speech at Benedictine College in which he told women they should aspire to be homemakers. Take a look.
I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it, but the true God-centered pride. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men.
Now, Tommy, this created a huge furore, of course. The Kansas City, or the NFL, I think, threw him under a bus immediately, said they were outraged, it wasn't their opinions and so on. But there's been a lot of surprising voices of support. Bill Maher, for example, a liberal, came out and basically supported his right to say. This is obviously religiously motivated, what he said. What did you make of what he came out with?
Listen, I don't agree with everything that he said, but I also think a lot of people are taking it out of context. He's a Catholic speaking to other Catholics, so you have to put that in context. He's not speaking to people at a pride parade. He's speaking to Catholics who hold traditional Catholic views. And there's nothing wrong with him expressing his opinions. We can disagree with them, but I would also like to point out that when he's giving this commencement speech as a Catholic to Catholics, he's not like some of the other athletes who want to kneel at an actual football game or who want to force fellow athletes to wear rainbows when they're going to compete at their sport. He's giving a commencement speech to Catholics. So the left really needs to decide, do they want athletes to take a stand or not? Because we are told that Colin Kaepernick and others, LeBron James, Megan Rapinoe, they should be hailed for their political speech. But then Harrison Butker, who gives a speech, a commencement speech to fellow Catholics, all of a sudden that's a bridge too far.
Okay,
oh, please
James,
your
I think James,
honestly,
your response.
I mean, he talked about Catholic pride. Really?
Pride in God.
I think it's actually the most shocking part of that was the fact that he mentioned Taylor Swift and called her his teammate's girlfriend. That is so offensive.
Why?
That is so offensive. He said that, well, she has a name. She's one of the most successful women on the planet.
He was obviously joking.
He was talking about how
why have you got no sense of humour, you lefty?
Only focusing on having kids.
The woke brigade can never laugh. When you all get together, do you ever tell jokes?
Do you know what?
You're not supposed to be a comedian.
Piers Morgan, maybe Arsenal should take his advice and just sit at home and get married and not play football, because clearly they did a very good job.
Arsenal players are actually
fundamentally, why is he, as Tommy said, why is he not allowed to have those views? There are many women who sit at home, by the way, doing a much harder job than anyone sitting here.
Because
right?
he has a responsibility.
Sitting at home, bringing up children is a hard job.
Very.
So why do we denigrate it by saying that's all you're going to do? Why
I'm not
can't you say
denigrating
that?
it, but how dare you tell anyone what they should be doing? It's not an opinion if you're telling people what they should be
He's
doing.
allowed to give them advice.
That were in the room that they'd wasted 4 years.
You tell people what to do all the time.
I don't tell people what to do. But Tommy's point is right. He's allowed an opinion. But what you're missing is that this opinion is being broadcast to millions of people.
Hold on, James, would you have had a problem if he said go out there and be boss babes, girls, and be CEOs and all of that?
No.
You only have a problem because you disagreed with his stance.
Exactly.
And I think one of the interesting things he said is that many women would look forward to their promotions and all of that, but they'd look forward to being mothers more. Because actually, many women don't have great careers. Most women don't get to be CEOs. They don't get to be business owners. They usually become administrators,
so is that a reason to give up?
No, but the point is, we've glamorized this whole idea of women in the workforce, as in go be boss babe and do, own Facebook and all of that. And the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of women are overworked, underpaid, doing unglamorous jobs, and somehow that's seen as something to be glorified as being a boss babe.
But you know what it also comes back to? There's also this whole idea of what activism is allowed and not, and how should people be forced to do it. For instance, there's a football player who plays for Monaco in France, and he's from Mali in Africa. He's called Mohamed Kamara, and he and the whole team were told to wear LGBTQ and the rest of it, pride badges before a game, and he refused, right? And the French sports minister has now said he will be facing the strongest sanctions against him and his club for refusing to wear an LGBT pride badge. Now, James, again, I simply say this. Why the hell should he have to? If his conviction is from a country, by the way, which is a place where they do not believe that homosexuality is anything but a sin, I don't agree with that. You don't agree with that, obviously. But that's where he comes from. His religious conviction tells him that. He's not being homophobic. He's not saying homophobic things. He just doesn't want to wear an LGBT pride badge while he's playing football. Why the hell should he?
What, LGBT and the rest of it, did you say?
Yeah.
Do you want to know what the rest of the letters are? They're LGBT.
Even you don't know.
I do, actually.
Go on, then.
LGBTQFU. Now, back to what he was saying. Let's have a conversation about it.
You actually can't remember the rest of the digits, can you?
I
You
can.
can't. Nobody can.
Let's have a conversation about it. He also covered up a sign that said no homophobia in French.
Right.
So, you know,
But why should he have to
listen,
wear
on
them?
one hand, I'm like, cool, if you don't want to wear the rainbow flag, that's a bit awkward. But if you don't want to wear a flag that says no homophobia,
Why should he have to?
So what, are you pro-homophobia?
No.
That doesn't mean...
No, it does. If you don't want to support,
He doesn't want to wear it.
No homophobia just means no bullying. It means
Right.
human rights. And if you don't want to say that, then what the hell are you
I've
doing
got to be
on a
honest,
team?
I wouldn't wear an LGBT pride badge.
Do you support
on
homophobia?
air. No.
Right.
But this is Piers. It is a private. It is a football team, right? That's their prerogative. This is not a nation
he doesn't have to
state,
wear it.
implementing this. Yeah, I mean, right. So I don't know why you're getting so upset, and also there's like a weird
Because they're going to sanction him.
Okay.
Well, they should.
Then he
Okay,
can
you
go-
think it's okay?
Then he can go play somewhere where they don't make him wear that.
No, Tommy, let me bring you in for some common sense as usual.
No, but I thought we were talking about Harrison Butker. I didn't get any bite at the Butker apple here.
Well, get
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country. I believe in girls' sports. I believe in women's sports. I'm the proud father of 2 daughters who are both athletes. I think participating in competitive sports is a wonderful thing for a young girl. I think it is a wonderful thing for a woman. And I think, unfortunately, today's Democrat Party has decided that women's sports and girls' sports no longer matters. And they're willing to push radical legislation designed to destroy girls' sports and women's sports. Ms. Gaines, I want to thank you for your courage. You are relatively young, but you have demonstrated incredible courage. And because you have dared to speak up, you have been demonized, you have been vilified. I saw when you were attacked by a leftist mob at San Francisco State University for daring to speak up. You had an incredible record as a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. You were a 2-time NCAA All-American. You were a 5-time SEC champion. You're an SEC record holder and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But yet on March 27th, 2022, something changed. What happened on March 17th, 2022?
That's when Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle and again resulted in a tie.
And so you tied. What was the consequence of tying?
We went behind the awards podium where typically you're handed your trophy, you're marched out, you're named an All-American. And so we go back there and the official looks at both Thomas and myself and says, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, therefore we're giving this trophy to Leah." And I question this and I say, why? And at first I shortened it in my testimony, but really he stumbled on his words. He didn't know how to answer this. And at first he's, well, we're just doing this in chronological order. To which I further pressed and I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? Because we tied. And if we're doing this off alphabetical order, G comes before T. So what are you being chronological about? To which this wasn't a script they had prepared for him. And he actually appreciated his honesty. He did say, we have to give the trophy for Leah because Leah has to have it for pictures. They've made that clear. Leah has to have the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this trophy, but you have to give yours back. You have to go home empty-handed. Leah Thomas takes the trophy home. End of story.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who's competed at the elite level, in your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make will overcome that male advantage. Especially in sports like swimming where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing. But when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
What I can say here is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
The rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the
Is that
conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm
that
trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're not answering that. Let me
gender.
ask you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is different than gender.
Why
and I do believe that women's sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But why have a separate category for women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100 meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
Without objection. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, a recent...
We just keep...
I don't know, what do you want me to do?
We just reduce the bonds.
Do you have money to post the bond?
How much is it?
I don't know.
I was thinking 1,000 count 1, and then 500 2 and 3.
That's fine.
I might have to check.
$1,000 count 1, 500 count 2, 500 count 3.
Judge, would you consider an ROR?
I can't do that for this charge, I'm sorry.
And the defendant's not from here, so...
I can't, I gotta set a bond. It's a $2,000 bond. If there's any reason you can't afford to pay a bond, use the free phone at the jail to call the public defender's office, and they can readdress this with your division judge, all right?
Your Honor, may I ask one question?
Sure.
Do I have to stay here in the men's unit still?
Yeah, I don't make the
question.
Sure.
May I
readdress this with your division judge, all right?
Your Honor, may I ask one question?
Sure.
Do I have to stay here in the men's unit still?
Yeah, I don't make the rules up there, but they should make a proper accommodation for you. You should be in a separate area. You can contact the bondsman to try and get you out. Miss Corey, do you want to note your file that makes you to follow up to make sure she's able to get hold of a bondsman and bonds out?
Yes, Judge. Miss Dragon, can I please have your...
Sex-based segregation is how competitive sport has recognised the performance advantages that male athletes have over females in many disciplines.
It's going to be a fourth gold medal, a fourth title.
But what if the pursuit of fairness and safety comes at the cost of inclusion?
I think it's just so sad, the whole toxic debate.
Any trans female who is included in sport excludes another biological female.
Sports now find themselves in the middle of a heated debate over their policies towards trans women competitors in the female categories of events.
even if that group does have some advantages, trans women will never take over women's sport.
You either have to have fairness by exclusion of trans women, or you must accept a degree of unfairness through the inclusion of trans women.
Stand up for women!
Sports will have to make that difficult decision.
New Zealander Laurel Hubbard, the first openly transgender athlete to compete in a different sex category to that which they were born at an Olympics. Her participation in the women's weightlifting in Tokyo last year sparked accusations of unfairness as well as support. As did the case of American swimmer Leah Thomas, a trans athlete who competed for her university men's team before winning a women's national college title in March. Like Hubbard, she'd met eligibility rules requiring her to lower her testosterone, but her victory divided opinion.
Keep sport single sex.
Do you understand that that women have absolutely zero chance of winning?
A woman is winning.
But the debate was about to intensify here in Britain. In March, a 21-year-old trans woman cyclist, Emily Bridges, previously one of the country's most promising male junior riders, was due to compete in her first women's event at the National Championships, having also reduced her testosterone. But with some of her rivals threatening to boycott the race and Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying transgender women should not be allowed to compete in female sporting categories, just days before the event, cycling's world governing body barred her from taking part, her case now under review. A dismayed Bridges said no one should have to choose between being who they are and participating in the sport they love. British Cycling suspended its transgender policy in the wake of the Emily Bridges case, pending a full review. And the governing body has now called for a coalition of organisations to come together and try and find what it called a better answer to the situation. A number of sports now desperately trying to find a way of handling this issue. With very few athletes prepared to comment, we've spoken to two British current elite female runners, one of whom's an Olympian, who both told us that women's sport must be protected. The athletes requested to be kept anonymous for fear of a social media backlash and a risk of losing sponsorship.
Every single female athlete I've spoken to is scared to speak out. The whole point of competition is to make it a fair and level playing field, and the only way to do that is to have a female category and then a male open category where the trans women can compete.
You can see all the world records are so much further, faster, whatever you want to use, than female world records. And that should be the evidence in itself, because trans women are biologically male, so they are at an advantage. There is so much more that differentiates men and women, and so much more benefits that males have than just testosterone.
On the other side of this debate are trans women like British racing driver Charlie Martin. Since her transition, the 40-year-old says she's lost physical strength, but says the focus on the advantages competitors like her may have overlooks the physical variations among all athletes.
I just wish people would try to understand what a lived trans experience is like, and then really try and understand this argument that's being put at trans women, that they're trying to ruin female sport. No one wants that. Trans women just want to go out and live a life and play sport like anyone else. I'm sure if you look into sport, there are people out there who have these advantages which people celebrate, and they just say, this person's amazing, wow, look how good they are, look how fast they are, look how high they can climb, whatever it is. And yet as soon as we look at transgender women, it's like a completely different set of rules. And that to me feels like blatant discrimination.
2 years ago, World Rugby became the first international sports federation to say transgender women should not compete in the elite women's game on safety grounds. And one of the sports scientists behind the policy insists fairness in other sports cannot be achieved through just testosterone suppression.
Once testosterone has done its work during puberty, and we see increased muscle mass, bone density changes, the shape of the skeleton changes, the heart and the lung, the hemoglobins. All of those things are significant contributors to performance. Now, until it can be shown that that advantage doesn't persist or exist in trans women, then I would say that there's no basis to allow trans women in.
But last year, in a reversal of its previous policy, the International Olympic Committee placed the burden on individual sports to decide their own eligibility criteria, concluding there should be no presumption that trans women have an automatic advantage. A transgender sports scientist who has advised the IOC told me the threat to women's sport has been overstated.
So the question isn't, do trans women have advantages, but can trans women and cisgender women compete against one another in meaningful competition? Truthfully, the answer isn't definitive yet, and certainly in all sports, we don't know. The science is in its infancy, and we are not going to have definitive answers for probably 20 years.
But as the debate continues, the sense is that having tried to find a balance between fairness, safety and inclusion, sports now find themselves under unprecedented pressure to choose which to prioritise in what is one of the biggest issues now confronting them.
Right, so I don't know why you're getting so upset, and also there's like a weird
Because they're going to sanction him.
Okay.
They should. Okay, you think that's okay?
Then he can go play somewhere where they don't make him wear that.
No, Tommy, let me bring you in for some common sense as usual.
No, but I thought we were talking about Harrison Butker. I didn't get any bite at the Butker apple here.
Well, have a bite of the Butker apple. Go on.
We all know what we're probably going to say, so we can just summarize that.
Yes.
Girl,
we all
don't
probably
you have a Beyonce album to get pissed off about?
Because
the testosterone is not a perfect test. Many women can have testosterone which is in what would be called male levels and still be women and still compete as women. So this panacea, this idea that suddenly you do one test for testosterone and that sorts everything out, not the case, I'm afraid.
An Olympic controversy feared and foreseen. Punches as ferocious as the row. A bout that faced calls to be blocked. And in the end...
Today we're diving into a heated controversy surrounding women's boxing at the Olympics. This issue touches on complex topics like biology and fairness in sports and the meaning of categories in athletics. I'll break down the key.
Women and athletes in particular have been scrutinized about how they look.
She got hit so hard she didn't know what the hell hit her. It's a person that transitioned. He was a good male boxer.
Frankly, to be put in that position must be awful, on top of all of the social media harassment that these athletes have had.
Iman knows herself, but there are questions in her head, and she asks, why me?
ناس حتى يقتل تفكير وذهن.
Algerian boxer Amani Khalif has re-sparked the sports world's debate surrounding gender diversity after a dubious genetic test thrust her into the public conversation. While Khalif asserts she is and always has been a woman, the International Boxing Association rocked that certainty in 2023 when it disqualified her from a major tournament after a failed sex characteristic test, alleging chromosomal anomalies. Also implicated was boxer Lin Yuting, who is competing at Paris in the featherweight category. The reputation of the IBA has been fraught, and its inability to share the methods or results of its tests leave its verdict facing skepticism. The International Olympic Committee, which oversees Paris 2024's boxing contest, has disputed it entirely.
We have two boxers who were born.
Well, I'm joined now by the British Olympic marathon runner, Mara Yamauchi, and by rapper and podcast host Zubi. Great to see you here, Zubi, who once took part in a weightlifting competition 4 years ago as a woman to kind of prove a point. And guess what? He won. and by Talk TV contributor Paula Roan Adrian, who will still be attempting to defend the indefensible on this issue. Well, Glenique Frank, just to be clear, or Glenn Frank, whichever Glenn or Glenique is identifying as this week, was invited to appear but pulled out this morning. And like I say, Glenique or Glenn, again, we don't know because Glenique's going back to being Glenn in future races and has always run as Glenn before, did say it was wrong. But you are asked when you enter the London Marathon, which category do you want to run in? Male or female? Or non-binary? It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous, as I keep saying. But there are still people who think this is perfectly fair and equal. And we should all just stop making such a fuss about it. So, let's have a little chat about this. Well, Zubi, let me start with you, because you come all the way in here. Great to see you in London. I love the fact that you tested all this 4 years ago, and you did it to raise the problem as an issue. And of course, you demolished all the females that you were up against, because physically, as a biological male, you're simply more powerful. But you exposed the futility, if you like, and unfairness and inequality of self-identity if it becomes limitless like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been talking for more than 5 years at this point, but especially the past 4 publicly about the absurdity of the issue. And that's why back in February 2019, I had that tweet I put out there with a video of me breaking the British women's deadlift record while claiming I identified as a woman.
You literally broke the women's record.
Yeah, it was. So to be clear, it wasn't in a sanctioned competition, but it was from one of my training sessions, just showing how easily I could lift a weight that's
well, we're looking at it now.
Kilos.
This is you as a woman.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly difficult.
Lifting about 17 Paula Roan Adrian, I would imagine. And I know you like a bit of weightlifting, Paula, so why don't you try and lift a bit of that later in your gym, see how you get on. Here's a spoiler alert, you won't be able to. Not because you're not a very strong lady, and not because you're not a very committed athlete in your own right.
Because of the biological differences.
Now, do you get it? Is the
and
penny
Zubi.
dropping?
So I get it, but what I wonder is whether you get it, Piers.
What am I missing?
What I wonder is why it is you're struggling with the fact that some people are different.
I don't.
And the people who have decided that they are different
Yeah.
and who want to live a different life,
Yeah.
some of them have the capacity to do that medically and legally, and they should be permitted
Totally
to do
respect that. Always have done. Always supported
So
trans
where-
people's rights to fairness and equality.
Okay, so
right
where the
to the point,
comes-
it clearly erodes women's rights. That's my only concern about it.
So where the absurdity comes, I worry, is where we've got this example of the marathon runner. And this was a fun run. It's the marathon.
It's not a fun run.
Great
It's not a fun run.
example. It's a great
No.
example.
Tens of thousands of people
London
raise a
at
ton of
its-
money, and it's a
Absolutely.
serious competitive race.
It's a great example of people getting the opportunity to push themselves, not only personally, but also in terms of their charities. And this is a person who did that, and they are now
No, this
so
is somebody-
fearful,
this is
this
somebody
person.
who
They're so
entered-
fearful. They've had to apologise, they've had to offer to hand back their medal.
Well, they weren't
Why?
that fearful because Glenn entered as Glenique, and Glenique finished a lot further in the race in the women's field than Glenn would have done in the men's field.
And how relevant is that to you, Piers?
Actually, to everyone I
How
know,
relevant
to
is
everybody
that to
I
you?
know that races in the London Marathon,
This wasn't-
every position counts. They all want to
It wasn't
improve their
the
time.
Olympics.
They
It
all
wasn't a gold medal in
Actually-
the Olympics.
actually, the ones-
This was
the front
about
runners in the London Olympics-
competing. It was about taking part.
So you think it's meaningless, the London Marathon?
No, absolutely
It's
not.
actually taken-
I've
It's
competed
actually
in
one
the
of the
London
more-
Marathon,
right.
and I see people running past me. I see people running past me of all different sizes, shapes, running for all different types of causes, and that's what it's all about. It's inclusivity.
All right, but let
It's
me bring
not
in an
about
actual Olympian rather than
exclusivity.
somebody who sounds like she thinks she ought to be one. Mara, you've been listening very patiently to all this. You've been a proper athlete here. Just try and explain to me, or to Paula really, why this is so unfair.
So males and females have, there's a massive difference in our physical abilities. In upper body strength, like in Zubi's bench press and deadlift women's world records, you know, there's a massive, massive difference. In running, it's about 10%. Therefore, we must have sex-based categories, male and female. Otherwise, females would be entirely absent from sport. And to answer Paula's point about it being a fun run, yes, a lot of people enjoy it and do great things like raising money, but Glenn could have done that in the men's category and not caused unfairness for the 20,000 odd females who ran in the mass race. I have to also clarify that Glenn ran as Glenn in the Tokyo Marathon last month, but also in the women's category, as he did in London. And, you know, you can say, well, the mass race is just a bit of fun, the mass race at the London Marathon. But an event like that is either a sports competition or it isn't. If you're going to say it's just a fun run, then why do they have a measured course? Why do they have timing equipment and a referee to enforce the rules? You know, even if people enjoy themselves and earn and raise money for charity, it still is a competition. Rules matter, and people have to respect the rules. And Glenn on GB News gave an interview last night. It was clear he had no idea what the rules are. He was talking about surgery and passports, but the rules, British athletics rules, which apply to the London Marathon, required testosterone suppression to under 5 nanomoles for 12 months to become eligible, and then continue suppression to remain eligible. He was talking about hormone therapy in the future tense, so it's clear he's done no testosterone suppression at all. He wasn't eligible for the female category, and therefore my view is he should be disqualified because he's not eligible.
Well, no question. There's no question of that. I mean, what's interesting to me, two things about you in particular. One, your courage in speaking out about this, because you were, of course, immediately bombarded with insults and abuse and threats, called a transphobe, a TERF, their favourite phrase, for stating what are simple biological facts. But also you are, by your own admission, you're slightly left-leaning. You're not on the right. You're not trying to score some political point against the left. And like a lot of people, I mean, I've always probably politically been slightly left of centre, maybe centre. I'm really a journalist. I don't really care about an ideology either way, to be honest with you. But I'm certainly not on the right. But like a lot of people, like you, like me, like Bill Maher interviewed last week in America, we find ourselves completely bemused that people, so-called liberals, on this ultra woke side now of the spectrum, have lost their minds.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a centre-left voter all my life, but for me this isn't about left or right. For me this is about the rights to safety, dignity, privacy, and in sport, fair competition and safety for 51% of the population. And people say, oh, Glenique only finished 6,100 and something, you know, get a life. But nearly 14,000 women suffered a worse finish position. What I would say to people who say that is, okay, how many women do you think it's okay to suffer to indulge the feelings of one male competing in the female category? Give us a number.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what about, I mean, I said to Paula, what about Laurel Hubbard, the New Zealand weightlifter, who qualified for the first Olympics a couple of years ago, having set records in the women's field, but she took the place of a woman weightlifter. The average age for the weightlifters in that competition was about half Laurel Hubbard's age. She'd been very unsuccessful as a male weightlifter by comparison, but she deprived a biological female of an Olympic place in that team. That, to me, is completely wrong. Now, someone said to me on TV in America last week, a female congresswoman, well, what would you do about it then? I went, well, fine, I want trans athletes to be able to compete fairly and to be able to compete. So they either compete against their biological sex, which seems to me physically fair, or they have a completely new category of trans sport. Why not?
So there's two things here. Just getting back to the marathon. If Glenique wasn't eligible, then there's no discussion here. Because absolutely, if she wasn't eligible, then she wasn't eligible. What I'm talking about in terms of the marathon is, when I ran the marathon, I was running with men and women, young people, old people, all running together. And what I'm saying is this fear that the headline around this is bringing up. It's bringing up a fear. It's making very vulnerable people, and we know that they're very vulnerable because we're told by the stats that they are the most likely group of people to commit suicide. So this is not just about a fun run. This is not just about women who require vulnerable spaces. This is not what we're talking about.
Okay, but Zubi, I would say to that of course, I'm very aware of the issues that trans people have had and continue to have. But I think people like Leah Thomas, people like Glenique here, they cause massive, bigger problems for the trans community. They make the whole thing look like a mockery.
Yeah.
They make a mockery of being trans.
Yeah.
And when you put your hand up as a 6'4" biological man and say, I am now competing against women in a swimming pool, no trans person who doesn't want that attention is doing anything other than saying, this is making my life hell. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that the so-called activists are harming the group that they're claiming to advocate for, as well as harming 51% of the whole human population. Because let's be real, all of this stuff, all the negative downstream impacts are on girls, on women. They are not on boys and men at all. I'd say this whole thing is incredibly misogynistic, and I don't like to throw that word around too much. To take the conversation up a level as well, I have a question, and the whole thing is, why are we trying to force people, and why are so many people entertaining the denial of reality itself?
Yeah.
Women's rights are incredibly important. Fairness in sports is important. Safety and security and privacy, all of these things are very important. The fundamental problem at the root of this is everyone dancing around pretending that a man can truly be a woman and a woman can truly be a man. This is not me being transphobic or hateful or being a bigot, anything like that. It's simply that reality exists. Biology is real.
And is that reality a legal one? Because in this country it is. It is a legal reality, Zubi, that you can change your gender.
You cannot change your biological sex. It's physically impossible.
I'm saying to you,
it is impossible
it's a legal reality that you can.
Can you change your biological sex?
We can talk about biology, and we can talk about the legality of it.
We're talking about biology, though. This thing is about sport. This is about males and females.
Well, the problem when we talk about biology is neither of us are scientists, but
you don't need to be a scientist to know male and woman.
You and I both know that it's a lot more complicated than that.
What's the complication?
It's not as simple as, for me, it's very simple. And for you, it may be very simple. But I think we're indulging an ignorance by not suggesting that there is more to it than that.
Can you become male?
I don't want to be a male.
But can you become male? Is there anything that could be done that could turn you into a male in the way that I'm male and Piers is male? Is that possible?
See, now, do you see how you've qualified your question? So you first asked me, can I become a male? And I would suggest probably yes, in terms of medically. But then you said, like you and Piers, and that's where we start to get complicated.
Paula, I hoped we would have taken you a little further down your journey. I fear when you say you think you can become male, you can't, because male is a sex.
I can have gender recognition, can't I? I can legally become a male.
We've got to leave it there, but you can't actually become a biological male. And nor can I, you'll be relieved to hear, become a biological female. Because I'm quite tempted right now to start entering the cricket competition, right? And smashing female biological bowlers all over the place and feeling good about myself. Only I wouldn't. I'd feel ashamed. I think it's embarrassing.
I think you're pumping above your weight there.
Well, you wait till
female cricketers.
As I say, wait till Usain Bolt goes, I'm identifying as a woman, and runs in the 100-metre final at the Olympics. And you lot all go, well done, Usaini. Well done, Usaini. It's a joke. Anyway, Paula, lovely to see you. Mara, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Zubi, great to have you here in London. Really appreciate you coming in too. And go follow this guy on Twitter. He just passed 1 million followers on Twitter, so only 7.5 million to catch me, which I know he's keen to do.
Veronica Ivy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to say from the top, because I've noticed this happens in every conversation. Every time you bring up trans rights, or if you have a discussion and you say trans, people tense up. I understand why. We live in a world where now there are people who are so transphobic that it makes it almost impossible for people who aren't to ask any questions, to have any conversations, to have any discourse that doesn't lump them in with transphobia. And so I'm really glad that you're joining us on the show to talk about this, because it feels like one of the biggest issues in America, and yet no one can seem to talk about it. So let's start with your journey.